Wait, what about this part?
Shh. Welcome to TBR, a podcast where two besties read. I'm Addi.
And I'm Alex, and join us as we reread,
Review,
and reevaluate our favorite books over the years.
Shh, I'm reading.
This week on TBR, we're covering our end of book discussions and chapter 30 of part 6 in The Whispering Skull.
Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to another episode of TBR. I'm going to introduce our co-hosts, Addi and Alex.
Hey!
Hello!
I'm pretty sure you're wondering, who the hell is this lower registered voice on the call? Let me tell you. We promised last episode that we had a surprise for you this week. And now to introduce our guest, this is my brother, Carson. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Do you have a fun drink with you? Because that's always what we ask. What are you drinking?
Water.
Wow, another person who's hydrated.
Alex usually always has a Diet Coke.
And I do. And water. I have both.
Good.
And what do I usually have, Alex?
Tea. There it is. Beautiful. This week we're covering the last chapter of part 6 through the Looking Glass, chapter 30, and doing our overall book review and discussion. So, guys, our question this week is, what is a series, TV, movie, or book that you've misjudged?
Ooh, I know because, and specifically, I like this question because my brother's on here. A movie that I misjudged, and Carson's gonna laugh at me because he knows. How to Train Your Dragon. I thought the movie was gonna be so freaking stupid, and Carson was the little engine that could, he believed. and he was right. Am I wrong, Carson?
Nah.
I mean, the music's great. I don't know how you misjudged it.
It is. A great storyline, solid sequel. Like, honestly, on my list of, like, movie sequels, that's a top one. Like, it's just as good as the first. I can't compare. What about you two? What about you, Alex?
I had a hard time with this question. I tried. I have a lot of things that I've judged harshly and have not changed my opinion on. But I guess for a TV show, What We Do in the Shadows on Hulu, and I watched the first episode and I was like, this is stupid. And then I got COVID and I had nothing to watch, so I binge watched it, and it's so good.
I haven't seen it, so I'm intrigued now. Maybe I need to check it out.
Yeah, it's good. Highly recommend.
Carson, have you seen that one?
No, I've been tempted a few times, though. I heard that got canceled.
Oh.
It did.
Yeah.
We'll accept it. There are some TV show cancellations. Lockwood, go. We will not accept.
And with an E.
Oh, yeah. Justice for Anne with an E. What a show. Anyways, that's my other soapbox. I could do an entire podcast on that show, but I digress. Carson, what about you?
I would have to say One Piece.
Oh.
My roommate was always into it, and, you know, I would see a few things here and there, and it kind of just looked like this goofy story. And the main character, yes, he is very goofy. But I actually started reading it about a year ago, and have been slowly getting through it. And it's very complex in its characterization, and having backstories of the characters that are both sad and compelling, that make you want to know more about the characters and see their storylines come to an end.
So I have to ask, did you watch the live action Netflix adaptation?
Yeah, the live action adaptation is pretty good. They change a few things, which kind of makes sense for, you know, the medium of live action remake. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, most of those actors nail their roles. The person that plays Mihawk, he is so spot on to the manga. It is insane.
Alex, have you seen the anime for that show at all?
Not the anime. I thought about getting into after I watched the live action, but it's like thousands of episodes, so.
I would recommend reading the manga. Yes, it is over 1,000 chapters, but it's only 20 pages a chapter of comic.
That's light work.
Alex reads so fast.
Yeah, so like a couple minutes for 10 chapters for you, easy.
I could do it. I'll add that to my TBR.
Yes.
All right, Alex.
Okay.
You run through. Don't mess up the words that you wrote.
You know, I made this synopsis hard to read just for you.
Fuck you. Last episode, Carson, she wrote it and she put in the hardest words on the planet. And I thought, oh, she just wrote this just because this is what she felt like. No, she specifically wrote it because she knew I was going to read it and fuck it up. And then I did, and I couldn't read it, and then she kept laughing at me. She's a bitch.
The hard words were whilst and cronies.
Cronies.
Oh my god.
It was Winkman's cronies. I'm like,
Yes.
Last episode, we covered chapters 25 through 29 of part 6 of The Whispering Skull Through the Looking Glass. And these chapters were wild. Lucy and Lockwood arrived to Kensal Green cemeteries to save George from Joplin, Bickerstaff, and the Bone Glass, only to realize that Kipps also needs saving. Oh, jeez. Lockwood joins forces with Kip's crew to hold off the Relic Men while Lucy and Skull dive into the depths of the catacombs to save George and Kipps. But unfortunately, Lucy gets captured along the way. George looks into the bone glass and dies, but later pulls the ultimate Uno reverse and attacks Joplin. Lockwood does a superhero landing to join his team in the catacombs and joins the fight. Lucy fends off Bickerstaff's ghost and breaks the bone glass to release the trapped sources. Joplin dies. Womp womp. Deepak arrives to clean up the scene, and Lockwood shares the commission evenly. 70-30 with Kipps and generously releases him from their bet. And that's what happened in the last episode, which leads us to chapter 30.
Chapter 30 opens with another article, as the last book did, which we love. I love getting a little bit of that world building of, here's the newspaper article, and the side things of, oh, see page this for Anthony Lockwood's fashion.
Yeah, I think those end parts are my favorite because it gives you a little glimpse into what's happening in the world. But yeah, definitely love the little recaps that we get. It puts everything in a nice box with a bow, and Lockwood gets to brag about their case.
Yeah, I was gonna note, it says, Inside Today, A.J. Lockwood reveals all, and it says, like, see full Lockwood interview, not Lockwood and Co. interview. Like, it's just him. It's just Lockwood.
We know no one else really cared about this. He went by himself.
Yeah. Also mentioned in the article, it says Joplin, that we know of, has since been implicated in at least one murder. There were more? Who were the other people? How many people has this man killed?
I wouldn't be surprised if he's murdered a ton, casually. For science.
Maybe some of his dandruff fell in their mouth and choked them to death. Also, there's a quote that Anthony Lockwood has there. He says he was a man too fascinated by the past.
Very fitting for Lockwood.
What a quote. Very fitting for what we learn in book 3.
And it's a lesson to us all.
He's saying it to the world. Don't spend too much time in the past. And we all go, no, Lockwood, no.
Which is incredibly ironic because the last 2 cases, this one and the case before with Annabelle Ward, they totally dived into the past to see what happened. And they made money off of it and got publicity. So, super hypocrite.
Oh, yeah. Also, it says, can cemeteries ever be made safe? I, too, want to see page 25. In this world, I want to know, is there any end goal?
For the article, we get another, more subdued celebration. I had to look up what 11 Z's meant per Google. Apparently, you just have coffee at 11 o'clock.
Yes.
As a celebration.
I totally just skipped over that when I was reading it.
But it's much more subdued than their last celebration. Last time they pulled out all the stops. This one, just another case. Casual. But they're very excited that their check cleared by Deepak, and they're eating the food that George is guilt baking, which, same George, same.
Yeah.
Lockwood is mentioning that they had to leave out the fact that there was the bone glass there. They couldn't mention it at all, which is a smart move. But I also think that it's weird.
I feel like there is such an easy way to talk about the bone glass without specifically saying what it is and how it was made and what the purpose is. You could just say it was a really dangerous, psychically charged relic, and I think that the readers, both in the book and the audience there, would understand. I thought it was really weird that Barnes kept it out.
Because you texted me about this, Alex, it says that Lockwood chewed his flapjack. And you had a stunning realization on what flapjacks actually were.
Yeah, it turns out they're not pancakes.
Wait, they're not?
It's like granola.
Carson, let me show you the pictures. Listeners, if you actually are from England or are actually smart, unlike the 3 of us, and know what an actual flapjack is, way to go. We are so impressed with you. Please DM us.
In America, isn't flapjack just slang for pancakes?
Yeah, that's what we thought. No, they're basically like they look like mini granola bars.
Oh my god.
I know!
I was so confused why Lucy was crunching on a flapjack. I was like, wow, George just made some really burnt ones and she's being generous about it. But no.
I would have assumed the same.
The more you know. We'll add that to our British corner.
I also have that they're talking about the bone glass, and they're talking about, oh, it was really wicked, and it was terrible, and that, well, it showed you the other side.
Yeah.
It showed you your death, basically. That was the last thing you saw. You probably literally did see the other side, whether you wanted to or not. And, like, George, all of his questions, like, spoiler alert for Carson, because he hasn't finished the books, but it's so close! Like, all of his questions are like, yes, George, keep going, you're almost there. Like, he's like gets so close, and then he gets embarrassed again and gets very socially anxious and scared that he's oversharing again. And I would have hoped that Lockwood and Lucy would have learned from this entire book to just let George kind of obsess over these things a little bit, or they, but I think honestly this experience has scarred him so much that he doesn't want to share. He doesn't want to obsess over those things, and it's so sad.
Oh, we even see him scared to rub his glasses, which is a total George move because it reminds them of Joplin.
Poor George, our best friend. What's happening to him?
Lockwood once again brings up the question of Skull, because he did end up helping Lucy, whether that was truly his intention or not. He's once again putting it back on Lucy to decide what to do with him, which I think is really nice.
I like that he leaves the decision to Lucy, that she gets to set how much she wants to deal with the skull and what they exactly do with it, because she's the only one that can hear it.
We get a nice little note about Lucy understanding her talent and how it's getting stronger, how she understood what the spirits from the bone glass wanted at the end and tried to fulfill their wishes, which was to release them from their prison. And I just love that we're seeing her grow as a character. Every book, we're getting a little more character growth and a little more talent growth, which is really cool.
I mean, and again, it's for her journey over these 5 books that she becomes more confident in her skills and more confident in just herself in general and who she is as an agent, who she is as a person, who she is in relation to her position at Lockwood & Co. and just in this world. And after she makes her little speech about what she's learned from this entire experience and what she wants, then Lockwood looks pensively outside. George just continues cooking, and everyone's kind of in silence for a second. Of course, Lockwood is thinking of something else, which we'll get to in the next part. I think it's good that she has her moment, and then there's no arguing. There's nothing afterwards. They just let it be, It's really nice. She also brings up that she saw the symbol on the box in the Black Library that had the liar again.
Yeah, speaking of breadcrumbs, once again, another little hint at another mystery that we're going to figure out is what was Penelope doing with that box? And who was she giving it to? There was another breadcrumb that I think is important, and they literally gloss it over. It's that the whole reason that the Relic Men found them at Kensal Green Cemetery is because Winkman has an informant in Deeprack.
Yeah.
So there's a mole.
There's a mole. Which is the opposite of the TV show, because in the TV show, Deeprack has a mole in Winkman's crew, but now it's flipped in the book, originally what it was. So, interesting.
I feel like in Winkman's profession, that would almost be a necessity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, because relics are dangerous, Deeprack is going to be very almost vicious in hunting down relics when they're stolen. So in Winkman's line of work, you almost need a mole in Deeprack. Otherwise, you're gonna get caught.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think it's so creepy that they're just discounting it. And they're like, oh, hopefully he'll leave us alone.
Also, it's creepy because he tailed them, which means he knows their names. He knows where they live. And, of course, there's later books where stuff happens. But he doesn't do anything. He just sits with that knowledge. Holy shit, I wouldn't sleep for a million years in that house. I would be so scared. I would line on the house with sources. Like, absolutely fucking not.
Yeah, you gotta have a 24/7 watch there. Set up your Ring camera.
Then Lockwood makes a decision. And this is when we go, oh shit. That he doesn't want to deal with secrets anymore. Which, good on you, Lockwood. It's only like we've been begging you for one entire book to share something about you. Oh my god. And he doesn't even share that much.
No, it ends on a cliffhanger.
Yes, he reveals that he's going to show them what's behind the door. He takes them upstairs and he explains to them that the door has been unlocked the whole time. And that's just so sweet. It just makes me go, my heart. Because that means he had so much trust in them that they weren't going to open the door. He played this mental mind game, like scaring them not to open it, but he trusted them enough not to open it. And that whole just makes me like this found family trust. It just makes my heart soar. It's like sad, but it's like, oh, he really does trust people.
Carson, I have an important question. If you lived in the house and were an agent and were told not to go in the room, would you have opened the door and looked inside?
I would have been tempted, but unless I, was, sussing out a ghost in there, I probably wouldn't.
Self-control.
Wouldn't it be nice to have that?
Yeah, I would have gone in. I can't handle it.
Carson's like, wow, you're preaching to the choir. Where was it? There's a good line.
It's on page 422.
Yeah, it's on 422.
I knew you would pull this line out because I pulled this line out.
Carson, we are so in sync, Alex and I, if you can tell.
Nah, I don't think so.
You turd. Anyways, it says, as they're going upstairs, we pass through the clutter of the house we shared. Ordinary things, familiar things, that might in moments have their meaning changed subtly and forever by whatever it was that we were about to see. Oh. And there's a meme about this. The first two books are like, yay, ghost adventures, Relic Man. And then books 3, 4, and 5 are like trauma, sadness.
Tears.
Let's just take your heart and crush it in front of your face.
I look forward to it.
Oh, yeah. Carson, buckle up. Shit hits the fan. I have marked pages in there for you, Carson, when you're supposed to cry, call me, and then panic.
Will do.
Anyways, he shows them the room, and it's lined in iron because the psychic energy is apparently everywhere in this room. There's blinds that are covering the window. It's dark. And we find out the cliffhanger. Alex, do you want to say what the cliffhanger is?
His sister's in the room, and his sister's dead.
His sister's dead. It leaves you with so many questions. It's such a good cliffhanger. I mean, the show, honestly, I'm not surprised the show cut it where it did. But like for a book, especially if this book came out and then you had to wait, Carson, probably you.
Yeah, I got halfway through the third book, I believe. I remember the big tentacle ghost
Oh,
thing.
yeah, in the beginning. That's like at the beginning.
Yeah, I remember it in the beginning, but I also remember getting back to that scene. Other than that, I do not remember anything from Hollow Boy.
You're in for a wild ride.
Exciting.
All right, and now we're at the point of the episode where we come up with our favorite moment guessing game and try to guess each other's. So everyone pulls a favorite moment from the book, and we see if it's similar or not, and if we're correct. Addi, do you have your moment? Carson, do you have your moment?
I do.
Oh,
He's ready with it.
I've been thinking about it.
should we do him last?
I think we should.
Okay, Alex, my guess is the part where they jump off the Winkman's building and that whole, that purple moment for me. Like the wow, great writing.
I didn't realize this included the last part, so my favorite moment was just in this chapter. But yeah, that is a moment I love.
Is that your favorite part of the book, though?
Actually, yeah, it is.
Look at me go.
I think it's very fitting. Just the whole metaphor of her falling and jumping with Lockwood, the whole back and forth of what happened, the parallel in the first book and in this book where she fell off and now she's willingly choosing to jump with him. Yeah, favorite moment. All right, that changes what I think for your favorite moment then. Shit.
I'm gonna be honest, I probably have 5, and if you guess one of them, I'll say yes.
See, I would say the jumping moment because I think it's very poetic, but I think your favorite moment is when he gives her the necklace.
That is, I will say, that is one of them, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
What's your top?
It's like a tie between, the jumping, the necklace. I also just for the comedy, I love when George has the skull in his backpack and they're walking up the hill and she's like, why is he walking so slow? And then she's like, you brought the skull? And then he's like, well, Lockwood told me to. And Lockwood's like, oh, what?
What? Patch of grass.
Look at this grass. It's green. I just love the comedy of that part. It's just so funny. And then Lockwood's like, it'll be fine. And it's like, when is it ever fine, Lockwood? When? It has never been fine since Lucy joined your organization. Anyways. All right, Carson, you have a moment.
Yes.
It's locked and loaded?
Yes.
See, you're a wild card because we haven't had time to really gauge.
You've had 22 years to gauge me.
Yeah, I feel like you're our best resource here, Addi. You gotta give us good insight.
I feel like he's not going to choose a funny moment.
Okay.
I will say that mine is funny because of the implications that it has.
See, and I need to understand what implications you're speaking of. Because we know more about what happens at the end than you.
These are just character implications.
So open-ended, because I could say this in the last chapter where they think that Lockwood's gonna change the story again on how many people he fought, because that would mean that he does that often.
Well, even like the changing their outfits to go into Winkman's, that is a pretty funny part.
It means he has an outfit box ready to go.
I feel like it's maybe when Kips's crew shows up at the Wilberforce's ghost at Bickerstaff's house. That could be it, because it is pretty funny.
Final answer?
Lock it in.
That's my final answer because I feel like I'm going to fail either way. I'm used to it at this point.
My favorite moment is when Lucy and Lockwood figure out that the skull knew that George had left.
Oh.
And they release the valve, and the skull is just laughing. And he says, I thought that you guys were going to take 20 minutes to figure it out. It must have been twice that.
It's so brutal.
See, because that makes me think that the skull is actively narrating when no one's listening. He's actively narrating everything that he's watching.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
We've talked about this, Carson. We've said that the skull is secretly watching and then practicing catchphrases to himself in the jar and going, that's a good one.
Yeah, no.
He's cracking himself up.
that scene just made me think of like all the, not even internal monologue, because he's definitely saying it out loud. All the dialogue between himself that he's having when no one's listening.
Yeah. All right, we should move into the what if question of the week.
Our what if question of the week is, what if Lockwood was allowed to mention the bone glass in his interview?
I think, like we said, if he was able to mention that it was like a highly psychic source, I think it would have been fine. I think if he would have actually specifically mentioned bone glass, then there would have been a lot of questions from the public of what is it? And then you have the danger of that information getting out to people that might want to do terrible things. Not just cutting up bones, but the implications of what seeing the other side could be, because you could have a ton of Joplins. So I think it's safe to censor it a bit, but I think completely leaving out that, I think as a reader in this like universe, if I was reading the paper, I'd be like, something's fishy, something's going on.
I agree.
What do you think, Carson?
I would add on to there being more Joplins in that the religious implications of being able to see the other side.
Ooh.
You would have entire groups of religious people trying to make a bone glass to be able to see the other side, and people would almost be willing to look into the glass to help in the endeavor.
That's a good point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Was that part of it though, that like he had to take bones from people that were unwilling because he had to inflict pain on them? Because I think if he took bones from people that like wanted to be killed, wanted to die in a way.
I feel like if I wanted to die, but I was viciously tortured and torn apart, I would still probably be ingrained into my bones.
You think so?
Yes. I'd probably be screaming a few times.
Well, I would hope so.
At least once.
I would hope so. At least once. Okay, thank you for specifying that, sir. Alex, do you have any thoughts that you want to add?
I think the exact same ones. I think Carson makes a good point that it would have religious implications, whether negative or positive. But I think as long as like they didn't spell out how to make a bone glass or call it a bone glass, it would pose significantly less danger. But I think there's always danger in revealing knowledge. Because like you said, those Joplins would be out everywhere. They would take 2 words and then do some research and come up with a new bone glass. So
Yeah, I agree. All right, since this is our final episode of the book, we're going to discuss the domino moment of the novel. What is the domino moment? Great question. Ever heard of the domino effect, where if you change one action, a series of following actions would be changed forever? It's basically that. So, we're keeping it limited within this book. Let's just start with that. So you can't dive back into the screaming staircase and choose the same answer I did last time, Alex.
all right.
I have my answer locked and loaded.
Oh, wow, he's ready. What is one
Ooh.
moment in the novel do you feel like is pivotal to all the other ones? Carson, you're up.
All right. I would say that the domino effect moment was when Dwayne Nettles died, because that's when Jack Carver kind of realized that this item is both dangerous and very valuable, and then decided to double-cross Joplin and take it to Winkman. If he hadn't, then Joplin would have just looked in it later and they would have found Joplin dead and been like, huh, wild.
My domino moment is just George being on the case, period. Because we had discussed in that episode, Alex and Carson, I guess you can listen back if you want, but we had a what if question that week, Carson. And if you have any thoughts on this what if question, please let us know. Our what if question that week was, what if Lockwood or Lucy had opened the casket where Bickerstaff was? Do we think it would have gone down differently? And I think the conclusion that we had come to, Alex and I, was that it probably wouldn't have, because the moment that affected George wasn't seeing Bickerstaff's body. It was afterwards when Joplin was there and they got curious and they pulled off the silver net. That's when he was really affected. And Lockwood wouldn't have wanted to talk to Joplin. Lucy wouldn't have talked to Joplin. So I think just in general, George being on the case in general, I mean, you could tailor that back to George and Lucy saying yes, because Lockwood asked them this time, like, do you want to take this case? Like, he looked to them for approval. But I think just George being there in general, like, if he wasn't there, Lockwood and Lucy wouldn't have been infected. Joplin wouldn't have wanted to get close because he knew George was the weak spot where he could get in from the interview. And yeah, I agree with you, Carson. I think where it really shit hits the fan is when Dwayne Nettles dies, you know? Like, that's when I think a lot of other, like, especially stuff with the relic hunters, that really goes off the rails. So I think it's a combo of the two.
I was going to initially say when they decided to bring in Joplin as their guide to read the Bickerstaff papers, but I'm going to tailor that back to when they first went on the case and discovered it, the silver net slipped. They both got a glimpse of it and were already under Bickerstaff's thrall. As soon as the case was done, Lockwood said, oh, we should call Deeprock and get this cleaned up. And Saunders was like, no, it can wait till morning.
Ooh.
So I think if they had gotten Deeprock to come that night, they would have taken and disposed of the bone glass right away. And the relic men wouldn't have even gotten a chance to look at it. And therefore, Joplin and George would have been immediately, like, cut off from that source. So it would have killed their curiosity.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my domino moment. I just thought of it in the last 5 minutes.
Wow,
So
I'm dumb. That is really good.
That is really good.
I liked both of yours.
It's okay, Carson. We can sit in our stupidity here.
Yes. At least I have a blanket. It comforts me.
That's good. Comforting.
I have tea.
I got water.
Hydrate or dihydrate, folks.
Hydrate or dihydrate.
All right, and now we're moving on to the main segment of our last episode.
The
Big Brain Corner.
Again, since this is our last episode of the book, we now enter the portion of our podcast called the Big Brain Corner. Did we plan for those initials to be BBC? No. Are we going to change them? Also, no. This portion is where we discuss book themes, standout characters, metaphors, connections to outside media and literature, and critiques. Basically, it's the time where we put on our big brains and dive deep into the overall book discussions. I don't know why my voice cracked for that, but we're going to leave it.
All right, who wants to go first?
I want to go first.
Oh.
'Cause mine is not that great.
Okay.
I'll go after Alex because I feel like Addi's is going to be very in-depth and mine is not super in-depth.
Yeah, I went a little overboard on mine, but I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll save yours for last.
I started working on mine today. My big brain corner for Whispering Skull is the number 7, its usage and meaning. As Addi and I noted multiple times when we were reading this book, the number 7 comes up a lot. So first, I just pulled out instances in the book where the number 7 came up in a general category. So we have, it's been 7 months since the affairs of the Screaming Staircase, and 7 months since Skull last talked to Lucy. In relation to our Scooby-Doo clues on where Carver was stabbed, number 7 Portland Row heard an altercation on the street. There's the number 7 for the number of agents that were investigating Bickerstaff's house. We have Lockwood, Lucy, George, Kipps, Ned Shaw, Bobby Vernon, and Kat. So number 7 exhausted agents. There were 7 shades of dirt that decorated Flowbone's face. So just some general category number 7 that came up a lot. Kind of breadcrumbs that were exciting every time we came across it. Then there's the bone glass category of the number 7. As we know, the bone glass is comprised of the 7 spirits in the bone glass, so 7 bones, 7 spirits. That was confirmed by the Night Watch Kid, who had a quote that Saunders said, "The Night Watch Kid saw 7 heads and they sent him home." Carver said after looking at the bone glass partially that there were 7 from it, 7 not 1, so he also saw 7. Leopold confirmed during the Winkman auction that he counted at least 6 or perhaps 7 faint figures in the bone glass. And Lucy, our end-all source of knowledge, haha, pun there, source, said that there were 7 bones and 7 spirits. So that's the bone glass category of 7, which is kind of where the number 7 is mainly focused. And then we have the it's a stretch category where I make up things and make it fit. Kensal Green Cemetery was an important burial ground. It covered 70 acres. In reference to splitting the commission from DPRAC for the bone glass retrieval between Lockwood and Co. and Kip's crew, it was a 70-30 split. And then this is where some mental math comes in. During the Winkman auction, Lockwood and Lucy go down 6 full flights of stairs, meaning that they entered on the 7th floor. And during the fight at Kensal Green Cemetery, there were 6 relic men and Joplin, together 7 men total. This one's really a stretch, but we're going to make it work with some mental gymnastics. The amount of deaths in general from the bone glass add up to 7, whether you're looking at indirect or direct contact.
Holy shit! Oh my god!
That's a good one.
Directly deaths that were caused from the bone glass. We have Wilberforce, who was forced to look into it by Bickerstaff. We have Dwayne Nettles, who looked directly into the bone glass while he was stealing it from Kensal Green Cemeteries. And we have one of Winkman's men who died by looking directly into it, as we learned from Flo. Indirectly, more of a stretch, we have Bickerstaff, who created the bone glass originally and was killed by Mary Dulac after forcing her to look at it. We have Joplin, who was obsessed with the bone glass and walked into Bickerstaff's ghost and was subsequently ghost-touched. We have Jack Carver, who partially glanced at the bone glass and then was later killed by Joplin after selling the bone glass to Winkman. And this is the real stretch here, so please bear with me. We have Mary Dulac, who was forced to look into the bone glass by Bickerstaff and then lost her sanity. Presumably she died in the asylum, but we're going to say a little part of her died when she looked in the bone glass because she went a little crazy.
I'll count it.
And then some more flimsy things. We don't actually know if anyone died during Lockwood and Lucy's escape from the Winkman auction. We know Lockwood threw someone out the window. We don't know their fate. They might have died. And then we also don't know if anyone got ghost touched by the phantasm that they released when they were running up the stairs. So we're just going to skip over that. I was so curious about the number 7 that I did a search in the Screaming Staircase, and the number 7 popped up a couple times as well, so I'll just say those. In relation to agents' belts, their belts have 7 separate clips and pouches to store things. While they were investigating the house where Annabelle Ward was found, 7 doors slammed shut in a row. Lucy herself is the 7th child in her family. While Lucy was doing interviews, she was rejected by 6 agencies in 7 days, and on the 7th day, she went to her 7th interview, which was Lockwood & Co.
This goes deeper than we thought.
It goes way deeper.
It goes so deep! Fairfax was said to inherit Coombe Hall after 6 or 7 years, and for Coombe Hall, 7 of the wickedest monks were thrown down the well. While talking about Coombe Hall, Lockwood snuck in 7 flares from satchels. The 7th flare, which was the slightly larger than the rest of the flares, was the flare that was thrown down the well that ended the haunting.
Interesting.
And the last quote, while exploring Coombe Hall, the team entered the Red Room with 7 hours left till dawn.
Oh my god. Okay, so I know what I'm getting from this. I have a conclusion for you, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
We were only given 5 books by Jonathan Stroud. Technically 6 with Dagger in the Desk. But I just think that means, again, Mr. Stroud, come here. We want book 6! Come on! Give it to us!
We need 7.
Please, I'm begging you.
You haven't even finished it, Carson. You also want more.
Yeah, Carson hasn't even finished book 3.
Now you're invested. Now you'll want to finish the rest of it, and you'll always find 7. Because, Carson, when we found this out, we could not unsee it.
Yeah, it's really, once you notice it, you can't look away. Like the bone glass.
I love things like that, though.
But wait, there's more. So now we go into the symbolism of the number 7 with some general significance. Number 7 is a prime number, and it's pretty prevalent in our society. There's 7 notes in the major music scale, 7 days of the week, 7 wonders of the world, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 continents, and 7 is the value for a neutral pH. I added that in there because science is fun.
Science is fun.
And then there's some pretty significant psychology behind the number 7 with Miller's Law, which was a theoretical law that was posted in 1956 by George Miller of Harvard University. It's a theory stating that the average number of objects that can be held in human short-term memory is 7 plus or minus 2. So an example of this for American phone numbers is that the digits in the phone number adds up to 7 if you exclude the area code. So that's something that's pretty easy for people to remember. 7 7 itself is considered to be a lucky number in Western culture. You see this with gambling. With the slot machines, you win if you get all the 7s in a row. That's exciting. However, the number 7 is considered to be pretty unlucky in many cultures as well. There's also a lot of religious significance for the number 7 in various religions that are including but not limited to Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, etc. Some examples of this are the 7 deadly sins, how the world was created in 6 days, God rested on the 7th, which creates the Sabbath, newborn Buddha rises and takes 7 steps, and there's 7 chakras, etc. In tarot decks, the 7th card is the Chariot, which represents providence, triumph, war, vengeance, and when reversed, represents riot, dispute, and defeat.
Ooh.
And lastly, because I needed to end this somewhere, in numerology, the number 7 is pretty significant. All of this comes from numerology.com. For those that don't know, numerology is the study of numbers and their influence on your life. So you get your life path number by adding the sum of all the numbers in your birthday until you get a single digit. So the life path of number 7 is considered to be deep and wise and more intellectual than emotional on the spectrum. It's considered to be spiritual, so something deeper that can't necessarily be seen but more felt. Curious with a thirst for knowledge and answers, and analytical. Weaknesses include being reclusive, secretive, and generally being overall suspicious. And personality traits are perceptive, intellectual, mysterious, spiritual, reserved, skeptical, solitary, introspective, and analytical. And I just thought that was really fitting for this number to be so prevalent in a book that's more focused on these analytical characters, such as George and Joplin, and it kind of sums up their journey and struggles. So that's it.
Wow.
Well done.
That's all I got.
That was really good. Way to go. That was
Thanks.
so good.
I am knowledged.
Carson, you're up, man.
All right. So originally I was going to kind of do a dive into how this book kind of transforms the threat against Lucy, Lockwood, and George from supernatural to actually being people, which, this is a kid's book, so having a shift like that is pretty significant to a child. However, as I was reading the book, there was something that was very blaring to me, and I really liked it. In young adult fiction, a very common trope is the badass main character. They aren't bothered by fear, they're so cool, everything works out for them. And, Lockwood, George, and Lucy, nothing works out for them. But once I started looking a bit more, I saw that this trope actually doesn't apply. And I'll get into that in a second. But book 2 shows us more of the effects of the problem on the world in more of a nitty-gritty sense than the first book. Right off the bat in the graveyard, when we see Bickerstaff's grave discovered, a lot of the mistreatment of the children and psychics there. And then as we go on through the book, at the party, agents are allowed to wear rapiers almost as a sign of status. Next, you see the black market auction, and once again, the mistreatment of children to procure these relics. And then finally, the part that I was so drawn to is the varying effects of trauma on Lockwood, George, and Lucy. So, just like a little aside here, what is trauma? It can be really anything, but a kind of blanket statement is an instant where someone's world, once believed to be safe, is torn apart and no longer feels safe. Whether it be in a couple minutes or over the course of a year, it is an experience that makes one's world no longer feel safe and has a chance of lasting effects on the person. And how this applies to Lockwood, George, and Lucy is that their job, needless to say, is stressful. And they're not exactly adults who are well equipped to deal with that stress. Not to say that they are being crippled by this fear or that their trauma is overtaking them. They actually are there for each other. And you see that they lean on each other a lot throughout the book. And I feel that all of them are along this track, but they're at different points. Lockwood is much further along, whereas George is still very close to his fear, right? And that's kind of the track that they're along, is becoming desensitized to fear. And, we see this, that Lockwood is nearly oblivious to risk. Lucy is apprehensive, but she'll trust Lockwood. And then George is like, guys, what are you doing? Please stop. Please stop this madness.
Yeah.
The moment that I want to discuss, though, is when Lucy and Lockwood discovered George went with Joplin with the mirror, because Lockwood kind of loses it. It's not super shown, but his whole demeanor changes as he realizes that his recklessness has blinded him to George's feelings, and as a result he may lose not just a friend but a part of this found family that he has. And me not reading the next books, I suspect that there's going to be a larger emphasis on this mental toll placed upon the three of them, and especially how it affects their relationships with each other.
There is a resounding head nod and yes, listeners, just so you know.
That's all I have.
That's good.
So listeners that don't know, I've previously discussed I cannot watch any sort of horror or scary movies. My level of fear is the kids movie Monster House. One of the reasons I wanted to bring my brother on is because he actually loves watching horror movies, reading horror books.
I adore it.
He loves it. So, Carson, I guess kind of bouncing off what you said, like trauma and the themes that you see within this book. Obviously, I think in a lot of like horror novels, they build on that idea of trauma. Is that given that you've read, I know you love Stephen King, for example, and he has a lot of flawed characters in there. Are there any common themes from like those, like specifically tailored to trauma that you see reflected in this story as well?
A little bit, I would say. Mainly in the first book, at least from what I've seen, is that kind of when you do a franchise of horror and you bring back, the final girl, quote unquote, who is, for those of you who aren't accustomed to slasher terminology, the final girl is the final girl that is alive, and generally a sequel to a horror movie will bring back the final girl, and generally does kind of address the trauma of the first movie's effects on the said final girl. And you do kind of see that in the first book with Lucy and her fairly awful backstory, now being in a new place, unfamiliar with new people to potentially lose, and her having to face that again.
I know you haven't read book 3, but there is a sense of that also from Lockwood's perspective. Not really a spoiler. Obviously, we know he's like an orphan, and like from the first 2 books. And especially when you read book 3, you learn a lot more about his trauma, which is why we are head nodding very vigorously. Is because it builds on that idea of that final girl and how Lucy and Lockwood like similarly but very differently deal with that trauma. And then that is a tipping point between the two of them, is how they're dealing with that trauma and how they make their decisions and how that causes them to butt heads with their decisions. It leads to a lot of tension, a lot of sad stuff. Many tears.
I guess another thing about the horror themes is this is kind of what led me to looking at the trauma and how it's handled in this, is that I was thinking about that. Sequels in horror movies generally address trauma. Scream, for example. Oh my god, I love how they portray trauma in that franchise. It's fantastic.
Well, that's great to know.
I'll take your word for it.
I was looking at this book and I was kind of sitting there like, it doesn't necessarily address it directly. At least this book. I don't know about the next book, but it addresses it for the age that these characters are, of how they would be dealing with it. And I thoroughly impressed with Jonathan Stroud of how he handles it, because as an adult it's kind of hard to write how trauma from a child's perspective would be seen and handled unless you have that personal experience.
I agree with you. I think Stroud does a really good job at making it not too over the top trauma for children, because it is a children's book, but still bringing it within the story, because obviously these kids are going to be traumatized. I'm traumatized just reading it half the time. Are you ready for my BBC?
Hit us with it.
Oh my god, we still have one more.
I have 3 pages of an essay.
Oh my god.
I have chosen to look at the colors that Stroud has chosen in this book, because we see him mentioning them more and more in this book than in the last one, with the exception of the obvious red room. And for listeners, let it be known, we have actually cut out portions from our previous episodes where I talked about this to Alex, because we decided that this needed to be saved for a BBC at the end of the book, so here we go. I'm starting off with the disclaimer. as always. I have mentioned this previously in episodes. I am not claiming to be a professional in any field of color psychology or even coloring within media, so this is just based off my own research and understanding and what I thought was cool. Also, most of these sources are based on Western ideas of color, and I recognize that different cultures or regions of the world may have different meanings. If so, please let us know if there's a different meaning for your color, because I am honestly really interested on what that would be. And I looked into like a couple different other cultures, but like I'm not going to claim to like completely understand them sometimes. And so with that, take with this what you will, and now I present my research. First off, Carson and Alex, you know the color wheel?
Yeah.
It's a circle.
Yeah, what are the colors in there?
There's definitely a blue.
Green, orange, I'm sure. Red, yellow.
Wait, I got it. There's purple.
No way! Okay, so we've got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. Additionally, in my research, I'm going to consider black and white in that spectrum as well. Now, each of these colors have the power to convey different emotions to us based on the context and the usage. So let's just run through the basics of each color rapid fire. Red, you're going to think about passion, danger, anger, excitement, vengeance, war. Typically, this color is meant to draw our attention. It's to alert us and keep us on edge. And actually, there is research that shows that like when you present red, specifically in like movies, it does put your body on edge. And like, especially if you have like any sort of backdrop that contrasts the color red, it draws your eyes to it. Similarly so, and I'll bring this up later, but in the movie Vertigo, there's like red everywhere, and then there's one lady in green, and it pops out. But the red is supposed to give the audience the feeling of this lady in green is dangerous. And that's why, again, the red room. It's a dangerous room. You know, there's vengeance in there, there's danger, anger, and there's like the sense of war there. So, makes sense. Orange. Orange is warmth, protection, growth, enthusiasm, fascination, happiness, creativity, determination, and encouragement. This lies in the balance between red and yellow, between danger and positivity, sun and fire, so it has that duality to it of balancing the two. Yellow, as kind of stated, is value, warning, power, enlightenment, success, joy, happiness, intellect, energy. This is also an attention getter color, but it's more of a positive one compared to red. So that's why you have that orange, that's that duality between the two. But when overused, yellow actually can be extremely disturbing for audiences visually. Most of this notes that it actually does make babies cry, apparently, just so you know.
Oh.
Weird.
There's also green. So often we think of green for nature, but it can also represent wealth, growth, sickness, decay, luck, and connection. So similar to orange, this also has this duality for green, representing man-made versus nature, and how green actually provides that connection to us from something tranquil, whether it's good or bad. You know, it tries to find that peace between the two of them. Then we have blue, a big one that everyone knows. It's calm, sadness, reflection, stability, reliability, trust, orderliness. This evokes feelings of sadness and often in cultures is associated with religion, truth, immortality, and wisdom. Interesting. And then we have purple. Purple represents wealth, nobility, power, wisdom, but also arrogance, ambition, magic, mystery. And one article specifically mentions that the color lavender, so a shade of purple, and I'm mentioning lavender because obviously there's lavender in Lockwood & Co. The lavender color encourages calmness and tranquility of mind and is useful for both self-reflection and evoking a relaxed and meditative state. Okay, now we have the ones that I am considering. So we have black and white. So black represents power, sophistication, elegance, but also mystery, fear, remorse, death, formality, and it's also a symbol of grief, which is why in some Western cultures you wear it to a funeral. You will see some films pair black visually with another color, and what they're trying to do in that aspect is show that there's a mysterious persona beneath it. So if you have black and then there's red, it means that there's a mystery, but beneath them is danger. You know, there's another film, I think it's Apocalypse Now. I haven't seen it. Okay, apparently in that film, like all the scenes with this one character, it's like black, and then they have just like different parts of him that are like showing up yellow, and it's to show that like he actually is a good guy, but he's very mysterious. He comes off fearful, so he has that like effect where we're trying to figure him out the whole time, and after a while it becomes like disturbing to us. We're feeling warned and we don't know what to do. Anyways, and then we have white. White represents purity, innocence, youth, birth, light, goodness, faith, perfection, cleanliness, whereas black is the absence of all colors. White is the presence of all colors. Let's just think more on that idea later. Put a pin in that. Now I want to bring your attention to the colors that we have seen specifically mentioned by Stroud. Of course, he mentions various colors in the previous book, but throughout this one, I want to draw your attention to the ones that pop out and the ones that make me feel like they hold some meaning. First off, Chapter 7. Lockwood and Co. uncover Bickerstaff's body. It's mentioned that he is wearing purple. Again, this represents that power, wealth, nobility feeling, which checks out, given how prominent his family was at the time. And also, it's tainted with these ideas of magic, ambition, and arrogance, which we later learn also checks out for him. There's a good article done by Shannon Lewis on the meaning of purple in specifically horror movies. I chose horror movies because this book is a type of like horror book, mainly geared towards children, but still. And it says that purple's rarity also lends to its otherworldliness that borders on alien. This makes it the perfect color for dream sequences and extraterrestrial encounters. It is the color that of things that do not belong to this earthly realm. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, for example, uses a flashing violet filter during its psychedelic dream sequence. The shifting lights and colors serve to disorient the audience with non-natural techniques matching the disorienting vibes of a nightmare. Let's just take a minute to freak out about that description and its relation to what it's doing with George and the bone glass, and also to Joplin, that is mesmerizing them and like putting them in this very disoriented state with this literal bone glass that shouldn't exist in this world and showing them what shouldn't exist in this world. Freak out with me. Okay. Moving on. Okay, in Chapter 16 and Chapter 21, it has been brought up before, but it's really brought up in this book a lot more, but the color green and its relation to the skull and ghosts. Previously, I've stated that green has a calm but greedy nature, a balancing act, if you will. Its duality honestly intrigues me and proves why context matters. Green is a prominent color in horror movies as it represents death and decay, a sickening feeling, and the grotesque. When we think of media references to the color green, have either of you read Gawain and the Green Knight? It's like a kind of a Prince Arthur, like
I've wanted
it's
to.
really good. You should read it. In that story, the Green Knight is a magical entity of this guy that, you know, kind of gets transformed into this creepy Green Knight or whatnot. But the point is that Shannon Lewis, she also wrote an article on the color green in horror movies. But she says that green symbolizes in that story the kind of witchcraft that uses elements of nature, roots and leaves and flowers to warp the natural order. It does not break the rules. It creates new ones. Think of that with Skull. Like, that is Skull. He is like creating these new rules that Lucy and Lockwood and George didn't even think about. And we're saying that he's green, you know? There's another interesting article by Natasha Tse. I won't dive into the exact usage of the color green in the movie Vertigo, but it does play a major role in the narrative of the story. Now, some fun basic facts about the movie because it made me freak out with its similarities to Bickerstaff and the Bone Glass. Have either of you seen the movie Vertigo?
No.
It's okay, I haven't either. I'm too scared to watch it. But I read a lot on it, and if any of our listeners have actually watched it, please let me know your thoughts because I'm really intrigued. So the film was actually released in 1958 to a lukewarm, if not cold, reaction from film moviegoers. This film hurt Alfred Hitchcock so bad that he removed the film from studios and put it in a safe where no one could watch it. The movie was then re-released in 1983 with a full color restoration. The movie prominently uses the colors green and red, creating a contrast, tension, and dreamlike mystery that add to the thriller of the story. It becomes apparent as the film goes on that the main character, Scotty, is becoming more and more obsessed with this new girl, trying to make her more and more like the woman he had in his life. The green colors of the movie eventually engulf him and his vision more and more. Now, do we see the similarities with Bickerstaff? Can we all freak out? The creation that was thrown away and found again? The idea that something green, whether it was a skull or the bone glass, can engulf you and make you obsessive, leading you into a world of duality where everything that feels safe but is also dying? Again,
Mind blown.
take that with what you will. Also, some minor moments of color. We get a hint at the characters' personalities and also their intentions more. For example, let's look at Lucy. She wears a blue dress and predominantly blue tone colors. We obviously see this more in the TV show. She does relate a lot to the characteristics we talked about, you know, trust, reliability, reflection. But interestingly enough, there are some personality traits associated with the color of blue. For example, good listener, honest, confident, which she isn't now, but man, she does. She becomes pretty confident. Sensitive, stubborn, and self-deprecating. This checks out. Also, her placement on the color wheel, let's just talk about this, between green and purple, leaves her in a very curious spot, balancing between death, and power that surrounds her literally on the color wheel and metaphorically in the world she's in. While it isn't mentioned explicitly in the novels, George's color being orange in the show checks out to me. Just listen back to the description on orange and it'll make sense. And finally, Lockwood. This one blew my mind. I had to text Alex about this. Carson, hold your socks on. Okay. So he's usually described as being dressed up. In the show and in fan art, he's depicted wearing a long black overcoat, a white button-up shirt, and black slacks. He's a classy guy. What can I say? But let's think again about what I said about black and white. Whereas black is the absence of all colors and white is the presence of all colors. Black presenting this mysterious persona he wears of grief, power, sophistication, death. And I interpret this as being an absence of color, or shall we say, hollow. But he's not entirely the hollow boy we think of. He has a white in his color palette as well, leading us as readers and viewers to know that, as I talked about with white and cinematographers, beneath the surface of that mystery of the grief and death, etc., is someone who has experienced so much. He's experienced it all. So much so that we don't see anything at all. And what beautiful poetry is that? And finally, color. I'm just going to leave you with one other little teaser, Carson, because you haven't read them. But let's just say there's a silver being used a lot to fight ghosts, and a certain character is always wearing silver. And there's silver unicorns. Just saying. And there's one article about silver that says, from a negative perspective, silver can be indecisive and non-committal, dull, and lifeless in a colorless world, neutral, cold, and insincere. And it can also be interpreted as deceptive and two-faced. And with that, I give you my color psychology. I am signing off.
Wow. That was so
I
good.
can think of a lot of applications for like the stuff that you were talking about in different media, and it is pretty nail on.
All right, so now we've gone through our BBCs. We've gone way too far. We've dove deep. Any other discussion about this book? What were your thoughts? What was your rating? Compared to the last book, what did you think?
I think I liked it more because the first book, I thought the only thing that did it a disservice is that we didn't get a whole lot of George, especially like the Annabelle Ward case in the beginning. He wasn't even there. We love George. So I'm glad that this one focused on him, especially since his talent isn't as strong as Lucy's or Lockwood's, and he's more shoved to the research side of things, which is his passion. So he's following that. But I just like that we're following his struggles because he seems to be more of a downplayed character. I love that the overall villain is a person. Very Scooby-Doo.
Oh, we gotta bring up Scooby-Doo once an episode. Because a pup named Scooby-Doo, that shit slaps. Carson, which now you're on because you got me into Scooby-Doo when we were little. What is your favorite version of Scooby-Doo?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, yes, a pup named Scooby-Doo does indeed slap. However, I would say I'm genuinely a fan of Mystery Incorporated because I was a really big fan of the overarching story within it. Also, the animation was really cool. I haven't really seen another show with the same style, so it stands out well in my memory.
Thank God. Someone else.
Carson, did you have any thoughts of what this book compared to the last one? Because you read these a long time ago, and you're rereading these. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the first one will always have a special place in my heart because I thoroughly enjoyed it as a child, and I think it did play a pretty heavy hand in getting me interested in horror, period. But I would say, just barely, I would put this book above the first one because, like I was talking about, you see a more detailed view on this world and how the problem has changed it from ours.
Well, and with that, you see how this book takes what we learned in the first book and blows the world apart wider, especially the world of like relic hunting, you know, like that's insane. And even like other ways that people have dealt with the trauma, for example, Flo Bones.
Yes.
And how she deals with her trauma in a very different way than Lockwood does, than George does, than Lucy does. So that's also really interesting. So I do like that aspect. I agree with you. I think it's slightly above, if not at the same place as the first one. I really liked the first one because I think it does a fantastic job of setting the scene and meeting our three characters and introducing the ways that they work together. But I love this one because we kind of get a character dive in this book for George, just like we're gonna get a character dive in the next book on some people. You know, I will say out of all the books in the series, this is probably the one I forget the most about. Like, I forget, like, there's a lot of hints in this book that build, like, out of all the hints that are dropped in the first book and second book and the third book of actually what's going on in the problem, this one probably hints the most at what's going on. There's so much, like, hidden meaning, metaphors, like, things that when you reread, you're like, holy shit, how am I so dumb? I think there's a lot of that in there, but I think if you took that out, for me, the story is, like, not my favorite of all of them, but I think it's just because I like, not that, oh, I like the trauma, but, like, I like when we get more into, like, the actual tension between our team and the world, and they start questioning things more, because then I'm like, yes, burn it all down. Like, I get so excited.
I love it when my characters are traumatized.
I cannot decide, honestly, for the next 3 books, which one is my favorite, and I have talked with people about this. I cannot choose. They are all so good. Like, they're good because they build upon one another.
Yeah, I agree. I think 3, 4, and 5 knock it out of the park, and 1 and 2 do a great job at building the foundation of this world, but yeah, are more forgotten.
I would say a critique that I have, and something that the show kind of added on to, which made me really happy about, was Barnes's concern. I really love seeing Barnes in the show kind of scared with them and scared for them, and when he's angry with them, it's not out of I'm the adult, I know what's best. It is, I am worried about you.
Okay, now Carson, before we get into our last question of the day, Alex and I want to know, what do you think's gonna happen? What are your theories?
I guess for the next book, I know that it's about Lockwood. I know it's about him being hollow and stuff. And while I'm reading it, if my thoughts that I was telling you about Dark Souls and hollows and that are applicable, I might request to come back for the BBC, because I feel like I could have a lot to say, as you saw from my word vomit that I gave you.
You'll be welcome.
You will be very welcome if you want to return.
What I'm hoping to see is Lockwood opening up and learning to rely on George and Lucy more, and kind of strengthening this bond in the group.
Anything else? What do you think is actually going on?
Oh man, that's a question for smarter people. There's probably something to do with collecting sources and redistributing them around in places. To what end, I can't really say. You know, it could be for power or for money or something, but I don't know. I can't really lock down a motive yet.
Interesting.
Any suspects? This is a mystery. Who's fishy?
This book kind of points to Penelope Fitz, but I feel like that's a little bit too easy. I feel like rather than it being someone else, it's actually someone high. That Penelope Fitz is the head. Of course, she's the highest authority there is, but there's always another boss.
I'd say you have some good insights. You should keep reading to see if they come to fruition.
Shit goes down. Now we open the floor for debate between the 3 of us. Carson, we asked this last time. We said which character in the novel will join our besties group. Last time we said George. I would like to bring to the table a contender. May I submit my vote?
Yeah, what's your nomination?
My nomination, and I will give you my reasons. My nomination, Flo Bones. Because she's a tough cookie, but she followed through with what Lockwood needed from her. And she followed through to the end.
A true Hufflepuff.
And they even invited her over in the end, and she would show up. Come on, licorice. She was always looking out for them the whole time, warning them about Jack Carver, warning them about the Winkmans. She followed through on the case with Winkman, told them where the auction was happening, which is probably extremely dangerous for her. Also, she's a badass bitch. And when we learn what she's gone through, holy shit, this woman. I stan. She is a queen. So I think for this book, because George kind of was taking a backseat this one, I think she should be our bestie.
Yes.
Do you have any other contenders?
I was gonna say Skull, but he was a little shady in this book. I love his humor, but he was complicit in murdering Wilberforce, so maybe we hold off on letting him join our bestie till we trust him a little more.
I mean, if the Confessions of Mary Dulac are anything to go off of, he wasn't really in a state of mind to say no.
That's true. That's true.
Carson, do you have any contenders, or do you agree?
I agree with Flowbones.
Who's been your favorite character thus far in the books?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, probably Lucy, because she's just so cool. Maybe Lockwood, because of, you know, I do like a poor little traumatized, conflicted character.
Yeah, don't we all love them?
He's such an interesting traumatized character.
I love it when characters are interesting.
Hang on to that love for the next book for both of them. You're gonna need it.
Yeah, it gets a little rough.
Okay.
With that, readers, we're going to finish up our episode because we've been going on too long as always.
Our next episode will be The Dagger in the Desk by Jonathan Stroud. Since it's a short story, it's just going to be one episode. We're not going to split it into chapters, so look forward to that. But you can find us on social media. We're on Instagram at TwoBestiesRead, Twitter or X at TwoBestiesRead, Gmail at TwoBestiesRead, and we created a website. So go there. You can see our link tree of everything and some bios on ourselves on why we started this podcast and specifically why we started with the Lockwood & Co. books. So, yeah.
It's a fun deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got all this stuff in there. Please check it out.
Yeah, Addi made it.
I
Looks
made it.
great.
It's really awesome. Carson, have you checked it out? Probably not.
Silence.
Silence from the brother.
Well,
I'm going to decline to comment.
do you follow us on social media?
You don't even check out my website I made.
I apologize.
Disappointment.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I have no clue if I follow you guys.
I work hard on those memes. So hard.
I am offended.
I'm also offended.
Well, I know who's not our bestie.
Yeah, who's not our bestie? You were kicking you off the island. Maybe you could come back for the Hollow
Yeah.
Boy.
If you follow us.
I'm just kidding. Would love to have you back. Listeners, did you enjoy having Carson on our show this week? Please let us know. Just kidding.
Update. I am following you guys on social media now.
You just followed us just now.
No, I've been following you guys all along.
I have the notification, listeners. It just came through. He just started following us. I suss out the liars. I know you.
I've been here since the beginning.
Oh, that's such a lie. All right, listeners, let us know. Do you think Carson deserves to return back to the podcast for another episode? Are you also fascinated by the number 7? Is it going to show up everywhere now? 7. Are you intrigued by color psychology? 7. Do you also think about trauma sometimes? 7.
Let us know if you agree with our choice of a new bestie. 7. And if you have any other critiques of the book/TV show. 7.
7.
Well, that's it for the episode. I'm glad to have you, Carson. And as always, we end our show with,
Hey, Addi.
hey, Alex. Hey, Carson.
Thanks for being our bestie.
Yeah, thanks for being our bestie.
Aw, thanks for having me. Alex, thank you for being my bestie. Addi, thank you for being my sister.
Oh, stop. I rolled 7.
You rolled some cool dice.
Thanks for listening to TBR.
Be sure to follow us on the socials at TwoBestiesRead.
Got any suggestions for the other series we should look at? Email us at twobestiesread@gmail.com.
Join us next week as we read
Shh, I'm